Last week, I made a video responding to Zach, Ruslan's co-host, after he called the Mass a snooze fest when describing his first time going to a Catholic Mass. And he received a lot of backlash for that video, and he is responding to that backlash in a recent interview that he and Ruslan did with a Catholic priest. We're going to look at his response and react to that today. But before we get into that, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a member by clicking the link in the description. Now, let's take a look at this video. He also later on in the video calls out Catholics for something that I think is very valid and something that we should think about a lot more. But we'll get into that at the end of the video, so stick around for that. First, let's see what he has to say in response to all the backlash he got for calling Mass a snooze fest.
I actually went to my brother's Catholic church. He just started going.
Oh yeah.
We both grew up Protestant, so he's converting to Catholicism.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Zach got us in a lot of trouble with that.
Got us in a little bit of trouble. I got a little bit of trouble. It was off the cuff. It was
Okay.
later in the day.
Yeah, a lot of people were upset about that. Even under my video responding to it, people were commenting. And honestly, I felt like people took it a little too seriously. I even said in the video that I wasn't that offended by it. So I think everybody needs to just relax, chill out. He's saying stuff off the cuff. He's responding to his first experience at a Catholic Mass. You can't expect him to just go to any particular Mass and then have some kind of life-changing experience and convert to Catholicism. Like, it just doesn't work like that. But we don't have to take it personally. It's okay. It's not that serious.
But I talked about my time. I talked about my time being there, and one of the things that stood out to me, well, one, liturgies, prayers, awesome, a lot of church tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't pinpoint when the sermon was. Is that just like a one-off experience with a random church in the countryside of Northern California?
Also, I mentioned in my response to his original video that I thought I knew the parish that he was talking about. If this parish is in the countryside of Northern California, I definitely don't know what parish that is. So just disregard my comment in regards to that.
I have a feeling if we went to one of your services, the teaching would probably be more engaging just based on your temperament here and watching your social media a little bit.
Yeah. You should come by one time.
Yeah, I'm down.
I'm down.
Yeah, that'd be so cool. They should definitely go to this guy's Mass. I have a feeling it would be more engaging and the sermon would probably be better. And yeah, like I said in the video originally, if you don't like the first Mass you go to, then just try a different Mass. Don't think that the first Mass you go to is representative of every single Mass that exists all over the world.
Zach called it a snooze fest, by the way.
So I called it a snooze fest, and that leads to my next question. Is and then the top comment, mind you, the rest of the video, I'm like, I thought it was very interesting. I like that you guys value church tradition, all this stuff. But I opened with snooze fest, which was probably the greatest, the lapse.
But
in
it probably
judgment.
was though. I don't doubt that it was, honestly.
I love that he said that. And yeah, like I said before, we don't need to take this too seriously. And even this priest here is not taking it that seriously. And he's saying, yeah, maybe it was just a boring Mass. That's okay to say. I think in the internet, we have a bad tendency to just take everyone's words so seriously. And whatever somebody says about something, that's just what they're defined as now. And there's no grace given for them. And maybe I'm guilty of that a little bit because I said in my original video, if you think the Mass is boring, you probably think Scripture is boring. But that's not necessarily true. Yes, the Mass is rooted in Scripture entirely, but it could just be that some implementations of the Mass are just boring. Even if they are rooted in Scripture, it could just be carried out in a way that's not very engaging. It's okay to point that out. It's not disrespecting every single Mass to point that out.
And then one of the top comments was, when will we start going to church and not thinking about the entertainment value or something like that? And I was like, yes, obviously, for sure. Like, I'm with you. Like, I'm not a big laser lights and fog machine Protestant type of guy. And so my idea of entertainment isn't necessarily this idea that like I need to feel good, but entertainment from the standpoint of like feeling captivated enough to like be engaged.
That is a really good point, and one that I didn't think about when I made my original response video to his original comments. Yeah, every church tries to engage us in some way and keep us captivated, some more successfully than others. It's not unhealthy to want to be engaged in whatever liturgy you're participating in, necessarily, at least. Now, if you're going there only because you're engaged and you're not getting anything else out of it, then that is concerning, obviously. But I think he makes a really good point here, and one that I think a lot of people don't think about. And they later go on to make the point that, yeah, every church does try to engage people, whether it's an Orthodox or a Protestant or a Catholic. Every church is trying to be engaging in their mass. They're not trying to be deliberately boring, but different traditions prioritize different things. And yeah, I think that's true. And if that's what he means in his original video, then I think he's right about that. And maybe the way that the church he went to performs mass is just not very engaging, while other churches that perform mass in different ways slightly will be more engaging. And I'm sure there are some Protestant churches whose services are more engaging than the Catholic church he went to. So it's not the end of the world to say that, and it's not the end of the world for us to acknowledge that and admit that that can be true. Understanding his comments in this light does make me think about them a little bit differently, and I'm glad that he's clarifying it now. Later in this video, Zach makes a different point about Catholics that I think he is spot on about, and that I don't think gets called out enough by Catholics, and we should definitely call it out more.
What would you say to a Protestant that maybe has Catholic in-laws? I'm talking to myself. And they're like, oh, when are you going to get your son baptized in the Catholic Church? But I don't know if they're like really, like they're definitely committing some grave sins. Like I don't know if they're pulling up to Mass every Sunday. So it's kind of a cultural Catholic situation.
Yeah.
But then there's this deep desire for, I don't know, tradition.
Yes, this is such a good point. So, like you said, they're cultural Catholics. They're not really practicing. They don't attend Mass every Sunday, but they're very adamant that their baby or that their grandbaby gets baptized into the Catholic Church because of this desire for tradition. And this is something that unfortunately we see with Catholics who just kind of take their faith for granted, and they don't see it as important to engage with consistently or to follow consistently into their adulthood, because a lot of times they just think, well, I'm baptized, so I'm good, right? No, Catholics don't believe in once saved, always saved. Baptism is not the only thing that is required for you to get to heaven. It is a lifelong struggle of virtue, fighting against sin, and constantly receiving the sacraments and receiving God's grace through those sacraments, not just a one-time baptism and you're good for the rest of your life. And it's particularly frustrating when there are parents or grandparents who really want to baptize their babies into the Catholic faith but don't practice it themselves because it's very hypocritical. And in some ways it seems like you're playing games. Like you just think, well, I'm not going to actually practice this faith, but I'm going to baptize or push for the baptism of my grandbaby into this faith just in case it's true, then they're covered, right? And that's not how this works at all, like I just said. And also, if you're somebody who's trying to convince somebody to baptize their baby, like let's say you're a grandparent and you really want your grandbaby to be baptized and you're trying to convince your children to baptize your grandbaby, the best way to do that is not just to tell them over and over again, but the best way to do that is just to practice your faith, and by that show them how important that faith is to you. Ideally, you will have been practicing your faith for the entirety of your children's life as well, if you're not a more recent convert, so they'll know just from scratch that this is very important, and you won't have to convince them of that later on. But people are going to, especially your children and your grandchildren, are going to follow your example much more than they follow your words. I think that's something that's commonly known amongst parents, to their dismay perhaps, that children don't always do what you say, but they pretty much always imitate what you do. So if you want your children to see how important your faith is, then practice your faith and treat it as important. Practice your faith the way that you want your children to practice their faith. And if you're somebody who is not going to Mass every Sunday, but you're trying to tell people to baptize their babies or to get baptized themselves, look, get your own self under control first, and at least be consistent with going to Mass. That's a very bare minimum. So at least be doing that before you're starting to tell your children or grandchildren what they should be doing with their lives.
Do I just press them? I'm like, you're in grave sin. You don't even know what your own thing says.
Yeah.
I spoke to a priest, and he said if you don't go to Mass every Sunday, you're in grave sin.
Yes. Tell him that. Tell him that. Like you're not even living your faith, you know? I mean,
all right.
Usually I'm not that confrontational when it comes to that, obviously. Yeah. You know, all of us are sinners, right?
Yes.
All of us have committed grave sins in our life.
I think you should call them out for that. I mean, obviously be respectful, but yeah, if somebody's pushing you to baptize your baby or their grandbaby, then it is they should be confronted with the fact that they're trying to make this important in somebody else's life when they don't even think it's that important in their life. Because if they thought it was important, they would be going to Mass every Sunday. So they should be confronted with that, and they should face that and wrestle with that. And hopefully on the other end of that, go to confession and start going to Mass every Sunday. This kind of ties in with a video that I made last week where I was talking about how to evangelize to people who are apathetic about spiritual matters. And it's not to tell them what they should be doing with their lives, or it's not to tell them, here's all the evidence for Christianity, here's all the evidence for miracles and things like that. It's really just to practice your faith, and other people will see that. And if they're struggling with something in their life that you're not struggling with in your life, they might see your faith as a possible solution to their problems. And I actually put this into practice recently, where somebody who I care about very much was struggling with anxiety and stress over work, especially. And this person asked me, like, what do you do when you're stressed out about stuff? And, or like, why don't you get stressed out about anything? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I pray the rosary every day, and that tends to help me with anxiety and stress, and all of that stuff kind of seems to fall away. And now this person prays the rosary every day. They were like, yeah, can you pray the rosary with me? How do you do that? What is that? And so now this person prays the rosary every day, and they're not even a Catholic, and they pray more than probably most Catholics. So that is the best advice, I think. If you want somebody, especially people who look up to you or look to you as an example, whether that's your kids or your grandkids or a spouse or a niece or a nephew or whatever, to adopt your faith, do not just tell them to adopt your faith. Actually show them that it is beneficial by practicing your faith consistently, and even doing small things like praying before a meal, or simply just letting people know that you're going to Mass. If they ask, what did you do this weekend? Say, yeah, I went to Mass and whatever, or let people know that you're going to confession, or let people know that, hey, I'm going to go pray the rosary, and just invite people into that when you see opportunities. And I think that's probably the best advice when it comes to evangelizing people who don't normally have these conversations with you. Anyways, that's the video. Thank you so much for watching up to this point. If you enjoyed it, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a member by clicking the link in the description. Members enjoy early access to these videos, and 10% of membership revenue every month will be going to charities that align with Catholic values. So if that sounds like something you want to support, then make sure you check out becoming a member by clicking the link in the description. And until I see you next time, God bless.